A Western New York school district made national headlines when it shared a plan intended to provide heightened security for students. In the aftermath of a record number of school shootings in 2018, U.S. schools are working to be proactive to better protect students. For the Lockport City School District and others throughout the country, facial recognition technology could be a solution. While some say this technology will make schools more secure, critics believe it will negatively influence school climate, among other issues. Joining me to discuss more is attorney Scott Maloof and director of the New York City Civil Liberties Union, Genesee Valley Chapter, Iman Abid. And welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let me first tell you how difficult it has been for me to track down a school or a school official in our region willing to talk about this. So I reached out to Lockport City Schools, never heard back. I reached out to the city school district. They made their chief operating officer available, and then they later said, you know what? We don't want to be involved in the interview. Then the Monroe County School Boards Association president never responded to our email. So I'm going to give this to you first, Scott. Why are schools avoiding me? Why do schools not want to talk about this?
Well, assuming it's not you.
Right.
I think a lot of it is because when you really start to parse through this data is very sensitive. You know, I was thinking about it on the way here. You know, if I dropped your home address, you know, on a piece of paper in the street, not that big a deal. If I dropped your resume, it's even a bigger deal because now it's your work history and your home address. But if I dropped your diary with your name in it, you know, that's your most personal stuff, and you'd be really irritated. I think on this, you know, the scale of irritation and sensitivity, this technology, particularly with students, is closer to that diary than it is to the address. And so that's why a lot of people, when they think it through, say, we got to be very careful and maybe we don't want to take a public position, because if we're going to use it for safety, we start to recognize how sensitive it is.
So how does it work? So for the viewers who are like, facial recognition technology, what exactly is happening with this software, this technology?
Right. If you think about the technology, if I see you as myself, or if I see Iman, I recognize you. I know you. I've seen you and met you. Computers don't work that way. So the technology uses landmarks on our face. We have about 80 of them, and it measures them. So say the distance between my eyes, the curvature on my nose, something like that. And so it then puts a map together. So Helen, you have a unique map of your face. I have one, Iman has one. And so that is then used as against video technologies, against images. And it says, okay, is the image that I'm seeing an equal to this map? And again, that's why it's so sensitive. It's not just a picture of me, it's a measure of who I am, and I can't change my face, barring, you know, surgery, and even then that may not change it. So that's why I think there's a lot of concern in how it works.
All right, let me ask you this. So Iman, in terms of the New York Civil Liberties Union, when Lockport went public and said, hey, we got this $4 million in state funding and we plan to use it for facial recognition technology, the New York Civil Liberties Union spoke out and said they actually asked the state legislature to put a ban on allowing this technology in schools. So explain why. What are the major concerns?
Yeah, I think it started off with a concerned parent that actually reached out to our office and let us know that this technology was being spoken about at the school district and that they were interested in finding out more information and actually also stopping the program itself. And so that's back in June of 2018, we sent out a letter to the Lockport School District as well as the Department of Education and asked them to actually put a halt on the program until more information was being released. And so dating back to, I believe, 2016, when the conversation began and the Smart Schools Bond Act actually came out with this, you know, funding for each of the school districts across New York State, you know, we started talking to the school district about, you know, what sorts of process was actually put into place to educate people on the issue and what was actually about to happen. I mean, when we're talking about surveillance technology that's being used, the scope of information that's being stored on this piece of technology is tremendous. And in many cases, like drones, if we're talking about metal detectors, whatever it may be, and especially around young individuals, you know, like anyone from K through 12, we have to be incredibly careful about what it is that we're actually implementing and what sorts of information we're actually storing. On minors, number one, basically around their own confidentiality, you know, making sure that the parents are aware of what sort of technology is actually being used and making sure that the products are actually just as transparent as anyone says that they should be. But especially when it comes to facial recognition, we needed to put a stop on it unless we first saw the policy itself and understood the scope of what it was going to be used for.
So what can go wrong, I guess, with just this technology? I've read misidentification is one big thing. So let's say, and parents and students have been misidentified in schools that use this technology right now, but what happens when someone's misidentified? How damaging is that?
Well, I'll pick that up real quick. One of the big things is it depends on what the school does. You know, when a vendor sells the technology, they may say, oh, this is saving you a lot of work and everything will go, you know, really smoothly. But the challenge comes in when you get that positive hit, right? What do you do next? If you are screening for sex offenders, you know, against the registry, you know, you put in a place of process. This person can't access the school. They've got to have someone that comes with them, you know. So that's the real challenge, is what does come next, because how are you using it? And so once you have false positives, you know, it creates a big problem. Secondarily, you got some technologies being suggested saying, someone will not buzz you in. The system will buzz you in. And so even if you've got an error rate of only 2 or 3%, you can see in a day where maybe 100 people do come to a school, 3 people saying, I'm not getting in, now there's a problem. You know, and then finally, another problem that we haven't talked about is, you know, data breach. If this data is lost or somehow, you know, exfiltrated because the school has been hacked, then what happens to that stuff, both the still images and that map of the face?
I want to share something with you both. The Electronic Frontier Foundation released a detailed report saying this technology misidentifies African Americans and ethnic minorities, young people and women at higher rates than whites, older people and men. And the EFF also stated that, we've got a graphic for our viewers so they can see this, due to years of well-documented racially biased police practices, all criminal databases, including mugshot databases, include a disproportionate number of African Americans, Latinos, and immigrants. Iman, Scott mentioned false positives. When we have false positives in terms of things such as race, misidentification, what can happen?
I mean, what ends up happening is we're enforcing a policy on a specific group of people. We're only looking at those individuals, and the algorithms that are actually used to develop this facial recognition technology, whether it's used by the police department or schools or other sorts of institutions, have generally been incredibly racist. And so, I mean, when we're talking again about minors, then now we're also reinforcing this against minors who are of color. And we already see racial disparities when we're talking about any sorts of technology being used to criminalize these students, whether, again, it's metal detectors that we even see here at the Rochester City School District, if it's body-worn cameras that are being used by police officers that are in the school district, and the possibility of using facial recognition technology that would then, again, create these, you know, would expand on these racial disparities that would make people of color, especially students of color, feel incredibly unsafe. I think I just want to acknowledge one of the things, but the technology itself would actually also develop what's called an unwanted list, unwanted persons list, and that list itself, we have no idea, number one, who's actually on it, where is it coming from, and if we're talking about the historic usage of, you know, sorts of databases where we're using the same old algorithms that, again, have been incredibly racially biased, then we're using the same system to be enforced in the school district. And so those people of color, students of color, parents of color, may not be welcome into the building based on these false algorithms that, again, are just incredibly racially biased.
I want to go back to privacy for just a second, because Scott, something that we've talked about before on the show comes down to social media. I mean, anytime you go, and we live in a social media era, you click create an account. When you do that on a social media platform, essentially, talking about privacy, you're sharing a part of yourself with the world. Kids of all ages are on social media. So is that a realistic argument, or is it much more, since they're already putting their stuff out there as it is, I guess much more concerning is it when it comes to privacy? Well,
I mean, the best practices with any kind of technology, particularly something like a facial recognition or thumb scans, things like that, is opt-in. I should have a choice. Do I wish to participate or not? In a school setting, you know, I don't have that option. Children have to go to school, be it this school or a private school or homeschool. So you're losing opt-in. So that's one big issue. Second, it's, again, the comprehensiveness of this. You know, there are plenty of people who've said, I'm not going to use Facebook, I'm going to drop out of Instagram. You and I have talked about these issues. But when it comes to this technology, you don't have that choice. So it's a real problem. And again, I go back to the data breach, the training. You know, if the school loses this, or the the facial analysis is actually done someplace else, and that company loses your data, you've not opted in.
We could spend much more time on this, but unfortunately we have to close. So I want to thank my guests for joining me and for sharing your perspectives on this issue. And to our viewers, in particular those with students in K-12 schools or affiliated with the public education system, we want to hear from you. Is facial recognition technology a yay or a nay, and why? Reach out to me on Twitter and tell me your thoughts.